Hashtag Chapter 1. Anyone who has ever been a scumbag knows this. Starting a relationship recklessly and abandoning it is the norm. Ditching your wife and child is basic routine. So if you get caught and end up with broken arms or legs, that's already considered getting off lightly. And I just transmigrated into a power fantasy novel as a villainous male supporting character. I simply lost control for a moment and got involved with a fair-skinned, beautiful background character. We even had a chubby baby boy together. But who would have thought, when our son turned 1, the system activated. It reminded me of my identity as the evil male side character and forced me back onto the main storyline. With no other choice, I lied that I had cancer. After leaving a letter for the mother and child, I disappeared without a trace. From then on, I moved to another city and diligently played the female lead's #1 simp. After simping all the way, the female lead finally agreed to take me to meet her parents. But the moment I pushed the door open, I saw inside the beautiful background character I had abandoned. She was holding a half-grown boy in her arms. Her pupils were unfocused, her gaze empty as she looked toward me. The female lead carefully reminded me, my brother-in-law passed away not long ago. My sister cried herself blind because of it. She's a widow now, and she's gone a little crazy. Don't provoke her. After hearing the female lead say that, my mind went blank for a moment. That background character I casually dated back then, how could she be the female lead sister? The system, hearing my question in my head, was just as shocked. What? That background character you dated was Willow. I nodded heavily. The system started pacing anxiously, then snapped. Are you kidding me? This is a complete mess. She's not some background character, she's the biggest female antagonist in this book. No, you absolutely cannot let Willow find out about you now, or everything will fall apart. In the female lead's eyes, you're a devoted, gentle boyfriend. You absolutely cannot let her discover that you used to be a total jerk to her sister. While listening, my gaze involuntarily drifted to the child in Willow's arms. The kid looked about 2 years old, cheeks rosy and well taken care of. Except he had the same cold expression as his mother. When I looked at him, he blinked curiously back at me. At that moment, the female lead Freya looped her arm around mine and said gently, "Big sis, I brought my boyfriend. His name is Georgios." When Willow heard that name, her dull gray eyes finally flickered. I suddenly remembered that when I dated Willow, I had used my real name from before transmigrating into this world, George. She probably wouldn't recognize me, right? Freya noticed my silence and tugged at my sleeve. "Say hello. This is my sister, Willow." In a panic, the system quickly altered my voice. To everyone else it sounded normal, but Willow couldn't hear my real voice. Only then did I relax a little and greet her. "Hello, Sister Willow." Hearing the unfamiliar voice, Willow finally withdrew her gaze and responded with a cold mm. After the greetings, we all took our seats. And Willow just happened to sit directly across from me. Following the principle of the more you say, the more mistakes you make, I quietly sat there picking food. I tried to keep as low a profile as possible. But the next second, Freya frowned and said to me, "There's seafood in that dish. You're allergic, you can't eat it." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to Willow across the table. As she spoke, Freya picked up a piece of salt-baked chicken from me, her eyes sparkling. "Don't you love chicken the most? This one's really good." Seafood allergy, loves chicken. These preferences and restrictions, Willow knew them all. Her chopsticks slowly came to a stop. It was as if she had forgotten to blink, her dull gray eyes staring straight at me without moving. Even though I knew she was blind now and couldn't actually see my face, her gaze still made my scalp tingle. Nervous, I silently prayed that Freya would say less. But Freya scanned the table and spotted the sweet and sour ribs I always liked. She immediately opened her mouth to say something. In my panic, I didn't think twice and kicked her lightly under the table. But Freya seemed completely oblivious and still reached for the ribs. Desperate, I kicked her twice more. Before I could finish, Willow, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her eyes were unfocused, her gaze empty, but her voice was calm. "Mr. Georgios, you just kicked me." Hashtag Chapter 2. Freya's attention was diverted, no longer fixated on the ribs, and she turned to look at us. I never expected that I had kicked the wrong person. In despair, I closed my eyes briefly and finally forced out a sentence. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Willow didn't reply to me. She simply held her son, stood up coldly and said, "Take your time eating. The baby needs to be fed. I'll leave first." After saying that, she was led away by the nanny. From the window, I watched with my own eyes as she got into an expensive sports car. Back in my original world, I didn't know much, I was just a poor nobody from the countryside. But after struggling in this big city for some time, I had come to recognize quite a few major brands. Looking at the car Willow got into, I felt like I had seen it somewhere before. After thinking for a long time, I finally remembered where. It was the day I first met Willow. At that time, I had only just transmigrated into this novel not long ago. I knew nothing about this unfamiliar world except that I had ended up inside a book. No system, no cheat abilities. I had no other options, so I could only go with the flow and survive in this world. The first rule of survival was to avoid anyone who might be the protagonist. So if their name sounded too nice, avoid them. If they were too rich, avoid them. If someone looked pitiful on the roadside, avoid them too. Until one day, while I was delivering food, I was deliberately harassed by someone. I kept my head down and endured it silently until Willow stepped forward and spoke up for me. Actually, at that time, she had just stepped out of that very same sports car. But back then, I was too clueless to recognize it. I even wondered why the car didn't have a roof. Of course, afraid of hurting her pride, I didn't ask. I only asked for her name. She said, Willow. Oh, a pretty ordinary name. I felt slightly relieved. She asked me, he insulted you like that, why didn't you fight back? I answered honestly, because he was wearing Nike and Adidas. He looked rich. I don't dare to mess with rich people. I couldn't help it, I had to avoid rich people, but those were the only brands I recognized. Willow paused, frowned slightly and let out an "oh." Then without drawing attention, she took off the jade bracelet on her wrist. I noticed her action and asked curiously, why aren't you wearing it anymore? She said, it's fake, just glass. I don't feel like wearing it. I nodded in deep agreement. After all, I often bought fake goods too because I like cheap deals. At that point, I completely let my guard down. After all, someone who buys fake jewelry, how could they possibly be the protagonist? But if the me now were to look at that bracelet again, it was a fully colored top-grade glass jade casually worn on her wrist. And the clothes she wore, with no visible logos, were custom-made haute couture. Later on, as I got to know her more deeply, I also learned that she like me was just a struggling working-class person. She was constantly exploited by her boss and often forced to work overtime. Her life story was ordinary. Her name was ordinary. The only extraordinary thing about her was her breathtakingly beautiful face. But back then, I didn't think much of it. After all, there are so many beautiful women in the world, surely not all of them are protagonists. So I started dating this seemingly ordinary yet stunningly beautiful background extra. She was gentle, virtuous, and understanding. Just like that, we spent 3 sweet years together. However, when our son turned 1 year old, I discovered that I had a terminal illness. And it was at that moment that the system finally appeared. It told me that I was a vicious male supporting character and that the terminal illness was part of the role setting in this story. Only by returning to the main storyline could I be cured. I was so angry I wanted to curse it out as a human trafficker. The system, feeling guilty, quickly added, after completing the mission, I can give you 100 million and also send you back to your original world. 100 million. My eyes widened. Willow and I were both at the bottom of society. How could we have ever seen that kind of money? With that amount, we would never have to bow our heads for survival again. So for the sake of curing my illness and for the money, I had no choice but to leave a farewell letter for the mother and son. Going to get treatment. I'll come back when I'm cured. From then on, the system changed my identity, moved me to another city. I began my life as a full-on simp for the female lead. Meanwhile, after I disappeared for so long, Willow assumed that my treatment had failed and that I had already died. But now, by a twist of fate, I had met her again. Chapter 3. I was panicking inside, afraid that the mission might fail because of this. After Willow left, the atmosphere at the table finally relaxed a little. By the end of the meal, Mr. and Mrs. Liu had a good impression of me and directly invited me to their house. Freya also nodded. I just happened to be going home to grab something. I had no choice but to agree. However, when I arrived at their old residence, I discovered that Willow was there too. Although she had lost her sight, her work still depended on her. Everything had to be reported to her by her assistant. As Willow listened, she skillfully dressed her son, fastening his buttons one by one. Jack, listening to the assistant's report, grew drowsy and started fussing about wanting to go out and play. Willow let him go. But he still wasn't steady on his feet, walking unsteadily and refusing to let the servants support him. After finally making it outside, he just happened to run into me. He looked up, still staring at me with curiosity. Then, not paying attention for a moment, he was about to fall. The servant hurried over in fright to catch him. Jack pushed her away, mumbling a few short words. No, no. In the struggle, seeing that he was about to fall again, I instinctively stepped forward and picked him up. Jack's voice stopped abruptly. He seemed stunned. The servant explained awkwardly. Sorry, sir, this child is afraid of strangers. He usually only lets the young lady hold him. But the next second, Jack grabbed onto my clothes, squinted his eyes and murmured, Like. Everyone froze for a moment. Freya pouted and tapped his forehead. Humph, last time I wanted to hold you and you wouldn't let me. But you're so close to him. I laughed awkwardly and replied, Haha, maybe we just get along because we're similar. Freya didn't suspect anything. She only pinched Jack's cheek in dissatisfaction and went back to her room to look for something. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, then looked up again, staring at me with those grape-like eyes. He stared at me too many times and I couldn't help feeling nervous. Could he have recognized me? Impossible. When I left, he wasn't even 1 year old. He shouldn't have any memory of me. Then right after that, Jack pulled out a small photo from his pocket. I glanced at it. It was a side profile photo of me. It must have been taken when I was with Willow before. Luckily, the lighting was too dim and the picture wasn't clear. Jack looked at the photo, then at me, as if he had encountered some kind of world-class puzzle. But after all, he was only a 2-year-old child. He could barely walk or speak, let alone recognize such a blurry image. Neither Willow nor our people liked taking photos, so there were very few pictures left behind. Still uneasy, I asked, Have you seen any other photos? Jack barely understood, shook his head and said indignantly, Mom, stingy, won't let me see. Hearing that, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Good thing he hadn't seen them. Otherwise, he might really have recognized me. Just then, footsteps sounded behind me. After finishing her work, Willow immediately came out to look for her son. When she saw Jack being held by someone else, she said in surprise, You're willing to let a servant hold you now? The servant awkwardly reminded her from the side. Miss, it's not a servant, it's Freya's boyfriend. Willow frowned in disbelief and opened her arms to Jack. Come to mommy. But this time, Jack, who usually clung to Willow, didn't go to her. He shook his head while burrowing deeper into my arms. He said, No. Willow pressed her lips together, her tone turning a bit more serious. Jack, come here. Seeing this, I tactfully stood up and carried Jack toward Willow. Just as I handed the child over to her, Freya came back. She didn't even greet Willow and walked straight toward me. She completely failed to notice how her sister suddenly froze when she passed by her. Freya blinked at me and asked, Georgios, do you notice anything different about me today? Before I could respond in confusion, Freya smiled sweetly and explained, I'm wearing the perfume you gave me today. A bad feeling instantly rose in my chest. Sure enough, the next second, Willow's hoarse voice sounded, Where did you buy this perfume? Why does it smell exactly the same as the one my husband gave me? Chapter 4. I got careless. This Willow not only had a nose like a bloodhound but also an excellent memory. At a critical moment like this, I could only play dumb. With a perfectly natural expression, I asked her, Maybe I bought it for $4.50 on some cheap website. Do you want the link? Willow was speechless. She returned to her expressionless face and said coldly, No need. Well, it made sense. The current Willow was no longer the same as before. She probably wouldn't even look at such low-end gifts anymore. Of course, Freya probably wouldn't care for those things either. Come to think of it, the reason I was able to win Freya over was ultimately because I had been imitating the male lead's personality. Back then, the male lead insisted on going abroad to build his career. Freya had a huge fight with him before they broke up. My task was to imitate the male lead and rise to the top as his stand-in. After returning home, I started browsing job listings on various apps. I had just quit my job a few days ago and urgently needed a new one. As I was scrolling, I came across a local job posting. They were hiring a nutritionist. The description read, The client is a 2-year-old child, responsible for preparing the child's 3 daily meals. The child is a severe picky eater. Applicants must be patient. It just so happened that I had a nutritionist certificate. Looking at the high salary and generous benefits listed beside it, I submitted my resume immediately. Back when I went to culinary school for further training, it was because the system said that the standard for a devoted, warm-hearted man was being able to cook well. To win Freya over, I practiced cooking relentlessly. I even earned a nutritionist certification. Within a couple of days, I received an interview invitation. During the interview, they asked many professional questions. Seeing that I answered them all correctly, they finally nodded. Then they gave me an address and told me to go there for the final interview. While marveling at how strict the process was, I took a taxi there. After arriving at the Villa District, a security guard personally escorted me inside. But as I looked at the increasingly familiar route, I slowly fell into deep thought. Wasn't this the Liu family's old residence? Just as I was thinking that, the guard had already pushed open the door. I looked up and saw Willow and Jack sitting inside along with 2 servants. Willow and Jack sat on opposite sides, seemingly in a standoff. A servant held a small bowl, coaxing gently. "Young master, just take a bite." Jack directly slapped the bowl away and frowned, saying, "No." The bowl fell to the ground and the food spilled everywhere. Willow said coldly, "Jack, if you don't eat, then go hungry." Jack wasn't intimidated at all. In fact, he got so anxious that he managed to form a complete sentence. "When Daddy's here, he's not mean." As soon as those words came out, the servants beside them fell silent. When Willow heard that title, her expression froze for a moment before she said coldly, "Daddy doesn't want you anymore." Hearing that, Jack widened his eyes and retorted unwillingly, "Daddy doesn't want you either. You couldn't even find him. Daddy is in the hospital, it hurts." After hearing this, Willow was so angered by her own son that her eyes turned red. Her gaze became unfocused as she trembled and closed her eyes. Waves of pain surged through them again. Yet not a single tear fell. Her tears had already run dry the moment she discovered that medical report. Chapter 5. The argument between mother and son ended the moment I walked in. The housekeeper recognized me and asked in surprise, "Sir, what brings you here?" I never expected that this job posting had been put up by Willow. Originally, I wanted to stay as far away from her as possible to reduce the risk of being exposed. But just now, seeing the 2 of them bickering and Jack puffing up his cheeks refusing to eat, I couldn't help but feel amused yet also a little soft-hearted and helpless. In the end, I still told the housekeeper, "I'm here for the interview." Jack turned his head to look at me as well. His little face, which had just been puffed up in anger, froze in a daze the moment he saw me. As I walked closer, he became a bit flustered. He quietly nudged the bowl on the floor under the table with his foot, as if he didn't want me to see it. I chuckled. "Why were you getting angry just now?" Jack grabbed my sleeve and immediately shifted the blame. "I wasn't angry. Mommy was angry." Jack is not bad-tempered. Willow let out another cold snort when she heard that, but said nothing more. After learning that I was here for the job, the housekeeper said right away, "Perfect timing, the young master hasn't eaten yet. Please come to the kitchen and give it a try." I nodded and got up, heading toward the kitchen. Jack didn't say anything. He just followed behind me like a little tail. Not long after, I finished cooking and brought the food out to feed Jack. After taking a bite, his eyes lit up. In the end, he finished an entire small bowl. The housekeeper was clearly very satisfied with me, but still went to ask Willow for approval first. During this time, Willow had been quietly listening to our interaction. When I raised my eyes, I saw her looking in my direction with a hint of scrutiny. But now, I wasn't afraid of being exposed. Because a long time ago, when I was working every day, Willow had been the one cooking at home. And now, my cooking skills had improved greatly, completely different from before. Sure enough, not long after, Willow withdrew her probing gaze. She said to me indifferently, "From now on, I'll trouble you to be responsible for Jack's 3 daily meals." Chapter 6. Just like that, I began my life as a private chef. Not only could I earn a high salary, but I could also spend more time with my son. Willow almost always brought Jack with her wherever she went. When she went to work, Jack would sit nearby and play. Until one day, when I brought ingredients to the old residence again, I realized that Willow was unusually absent. Only Jack and the servants were there. I didn't think much of it, assuming she had some urgent matter to attend to. But while feeding Jack, I suddenly heard him ask me, "What is an arranged marriage?" I froze for a moment. An arranged marriage. Jack nodded. "Mom is going to have one." I was stunned for a rare moment. Willow really was at the age to get married. She had a child and she was part of a wealthy family. I had my transmigration mission to complete, but I couldn't selfishly expect her to remain alone for me forever. So no matter how I looked at it, an arranged marriage seemed perfectly normal. After thinking for a moment, I explained to Jack. "An arranged marriage means Mommy will find an uncle and you'll all live together." After hearing that, Jack shook his head. "Don't want uncle. Want daddy." I froze, just about to say something more, when a man's voice came from outside. "Jack, look what new toys Uncle bought for you." Jack and I turned our heads at the same time. At the door stood a thin man with slightly hunched shoulders, narrow eyes, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. As he spoke, Two attendants behind him placed several large bags of gifts in the living room. The man glanced at me subtly and asked, "A new servant? There's nothing for you to do here. You can leave." With a wide smile, he turned to Jack. "Come on, Jack, let Uncle take you out to play." As he spoke, he tried to take Jack away. Jack looked like he was about to throw a tantrum, but then remembered he wasn't supposed to be a bad-tempered child. So he held it in. Seeing his little face turn red from holding back, I frowned and shielded him. "Hey, before asking others, maybe introduce yourself first. Who are you? Does he even know you and you're already trying to take him away?" The man sneered. My name is Makoto. I'm Willow's fiancé." As soon as he finished speaking, Willow's voice came from behind. "What are you talking about?" Makoto stopped mid-sentence, then lowered his voice and said to me, "Sorry, we're not planning to make it public yet. Please keep it confidential." After saying that, he didn't press further and went back to sit on the sofa. Soon after, Mr. and Mrs. Liu also arrived. They sat in the living room nearby, seemingly discussing the details of the arranged marriage. After I finished feeding Jack and played with him for a while, I prepared to leave. But just as I stood up, Makoto came to the dining room again and said with a smile, "I left my phone here, came to get it." I didn't pay much attention and put on my coat, ready to leave. But just as I reached the front door, I heard Makoto say from the dining room, "That's strange. Where's my phone? Why is it gone?" My heart sank and I turned around. The housekeeper said, "Please don't worry, sir. The phone was always in the dining room. Perhaps it fell somewhere." But after everyone searched around, it still couldn't be found. Makoto pretended to hesitate. The only ones in the dining room just now were Jack and that servant. As he spoke, the housekeeper understood the implication and turned to look at me. One was Willow's fiancé, the other was just a hired worker. The housekeeper quickly knew who to side with. He said to me politely, "Sir, have you seen Mr. Ito's phone?" I shook my head impatiently. Makoto Ito curled his lips slightly, then said politely, "Mr. Georgios, don't be in such a hurry to leave. If you don't mind, could you check whether you might have accidentally taken it?" I narrowed my eyes and subtly touched my pocket. Sure enough, there was a phone inside. Seeing my expression change, Makoto immediately walked toward me. My fists clenched as I desperately tried to think of a solution. But before I could come up with anything, his two attendants rushed forward, pinned me down, and searched me on the spot. Like I was caught red-handed. Everything on me was taken out, and the phone was found just like that. "Found it." One of the attendants raised the phone and handed it to Makoto. But at that moment, Jack ran over, his attention drawn to something else. He let out a small huh and pointed to a corner where an ugly golden retriever keychain lay. "Ugly dog, mommy has one too." My heart skipped a beat as I hurriedly looked over. That was the keychain I had bought when Willow and I were in that ambiguous stage of our relationship. We had passed by a small street stall and saw it. One was a golden retriever, the other a chubby orange cat. Because they were uniquely ugly, I bought them. I gave her the cat. And I had always kept the dog with me. Jack picked it up and ran to Willow. "Mommy, look, it's a pair with the kitty." Chapter 7. For a moment, I couldn't even bother worrying about the phone anymore. All my attention drifted to that keychain. Willow, unable to see, could only take it and carefully trace it with her fingertips. After feeling it, her expression turned completely cold as she asked me, "Georgios, where did this keychain come from?" While cursing Makoto in my heart, I braced myself and used the same old trick. Bought it online. $1.50 with free shipping. Want the link? Even the system despaired for me. It said, "What a terrible excuse. Just go home, man. Go home." Whether Willow believed me or not, she pressed her lips together and said nothing. Makoto, not quite understanding the situation, spoke up again to draw everyone's attention back. He sneered, "Georgios, why is my phone in your pocket?" I replied casually, "I didn't take it. If you don't believe me, check the surveillance footage." But the housekeeper said awkwardly, "There's no surveillance camera in the dining room." I frowned and looked around, only to realize that indeed there were no cameras installed there. Just as I was thinking, Jack spoke again. He pointed at Makoto, then at my coat, and said in a soft, childish voice, "He put it there." Makoto panicked for a brief moment but quickly regained his composure. "What are you saying? Why would I put my own phone in his pocket for no reason?" Unexpectedly, Jack didn't back down at all. He raised his arm and showed the watch on his wrist. He held it out toward me, his eyes shining as he said, "Recording." I immediately understood what he meant and curled my lips into a smile. "Your watch has a recording function. Did you record it just now? Jack nodded and added, Mom's phone can watch. After saying that, he went straight to grab Willow's phone and asked her to unlock it. Willow remained silent but cooperated, pulling up the video that had been sent to her phone. Once it was played, everyone clearly saw it. Makoto sneaky and furtive, taking advantage of my inattention, secretly slipping the phone into my coat pocket. For a moment, the truth was completely revealed. Makoto's face turned pale. Meanwhile, I let out a sigh of relief. If it weren't for Jack, I didn't know how much effort it would have taken for me to prove my innocence. Jack blinked, looking at me with an expression that clearly asked for praise. I smiled, gave him a thumbs up and sincerely said, Jack, you're amazing. Chapter 8. After that, I never saw Makoto again. That day when he targeted me, it was probably because I had embarrassed him. Or maybe he thought I was getting in the way of him getting close to Jack. So he tried to frame me and make me lose this job. But in the end, it backfired and made Mr. and Mrs. Liu start reconsidering the arranged marriage. On the other side, after hearing about this, Freya said with satisfaction, My parents probably like you a lot now. Tomorrow's banquet, let's attend together. The system reminded me in my mind. Important plot point reached. Host must attend the banquet. So I nodded and agreed. This was the first time Freya and I appeared together in public. For a moment, everyone's eyes turned toward us. Some people even came up directly to ask about our relationship. Freya gently held my arm, a smile lingering in her eyes, and said straightforwardly, My fiancé. The crowd erupted in surprise. Congratulations and well wishes poured in all at once. Until the banquet was nearly over, nothing major seemed to happen. I couldn't help asking the system, What exactly is today's key plot? Just as I finished asking, a commotion came from the entrance. The system exclaimed excitedly, He's here. The male lead has arrived. My body froze for a moment as I instinctively looked toward the door. Finally, I saw the male lead the system had been talking about. He was wearing a trench coat, looking like he had rushed over from afar. He stood at the entrance and stared at Freya for a long time. At last, with a lonely expression, he said, Freya, I'm back. The Cold War between the male and female leads finally came to an end with his return. And I, the stand-in, was finally about to exit the stage. Freya slowly withdrew her hand from mine and looked toward the male lead. The system commanded, Act. Show pain, be humble. Best if you kneel and beg her to stay. I froze. Oh. But kneeling felt a bit too much, so I bowed deeply to Freya and said, Freya, please stay. Freya stiffened for a moment but didn't look at me again. Then she ran forward and threw herself into the male lead's arms as if she had regained something she had lost. For a moment, all the watching eyes turned toward me. As I watched the two of them hold hands and head upstairs to a room, I asked the system, Am I supposed to cry my eyes out now? The system replied, No. Now you need to turn dark and drug the female lead. 10 minutes later, I sneaked into the back kitchen. Inside were items prepared to be delivered to various rooms. In my pocket, I still had the room card for me and Freya. I took it out, trying to check which room it was. But when I reached into my pocket, I realized there was also Willow's room card. Because I had prepared a new meal plan, I was originally going to give it to her. She was also attending the banquet, so she had simply given me her room card and told me to find her there. At that moment, I looked at the two cards. I tried hard to recall which one was Freya's. Just as I was thinking, it seemed like someone was about to come in. In a panic, I picked one based on memory and quickly poured the drug into a bottle of wine. After slipping out and waiting for a while, the system said excitedly, The drug should be taking effect now. Go to the room and find the female lead. Chapter 9. However, the moment I pushed the door open, I was caught off guard by the sight of Willow. Her clothes were disheveled, the corners of her eyes were tinged red and her breathing uneven. A shattered wine glass lay on the floor. Why was it Willow? Expressionless, I took a step back then tried to close the door. The next second, she suddenly stumbled into my arms, clinging to me and refusing to let go. The system screamed, Wait, did you mix up the rooms? I almost cried. It was too rushed at the time, I couldn't tell the room cards apart. Before I could finish speaking with the system, Willow spoke hoarsely. Georgios. At this point, I could only brace myself and respond. I came to deliver the new meal plan. But after I said that, Willow didn't respond for a long time. She was slightly drunk, and with the system's completely artificial drug added in, her mind was already muddled. Her body pressed against mine was growing hotter and hotter. And me, smelling that familiar scent from her, looking at the beauty so close before my eyes. I couldn't help but feel my heart stir again. Back then, the reason I lost control of myself was because this so-called background extra was simply too stunning. Anyway, I had already messed up the mission of drugging the female lead. I might as well just give up entirely. So I leaned closer to her, mimicking the teasing tone I once used, lifting her chin with a smile. "Baby, are you feeling uncomfortable right now?" Willow's unfocused dazed gaze drifted in the air, making her seem strangely vulnerable. So I pulled her to sit by the bed, looping an arm around her shoulders. Her thoughts were in chaos. Hearing that familiar tone, she grew dazed, almost thinking she had fallen back into a dream. As if she had returned to the past. She trembled and closed her eyes, leaning against my shoulder in both pain and restraint. She was afraid that she might shatter this illusion. Until his teeth accidentally brushed against her lips, a sharp sting spread through her. Willow suddenly snapped back to awareness. No, this wasn't a dream. The next second, a sharp shard of glass was pressed against my neck. Her face flushed red as she enunciated each word. "Georgios, how dare you imitate my husband?" Chapter 10. I was completely stunned by her sudden reaction. Good news, my identity hadn't been exposed yet. Bad news, Willow now saw me as some kind of creep deliberately getting close to her. I raised both hands and explained dryly. I wasn't imitating him. She bit her lower lip tightly and said, "Not imitating? The same preferences and dislikes, the same keychain. Even the way you speak is identical. Among all these imitators, Georgios, you really are the most skilled one. Has it ever occurred to you that I am the original?" But I still had one last task to complete, so I couldn't come clean to her yet. Willow was trembling with anger and she lost control of her strength. The next second, the shard of glass scraped across my neck. Almost instinctively, I flinched from the pain and swung my hand to block hers. But with a sharp smack, it ended up landing directly across her face. Immediately after, Willow let go and took a heavy breath. I thought I had hurt her and asked guiltily, "Did that hurt?" But Willow seemed to lose clarity again. She subconsciously leaned into my palm once more. The system was silent for a long time before saying, very clearly, "Host, you hit her in a way she actually liked." I was speechless. Willow seemed to be struggling between reason and instinct. Within seconds, she pushed my hand away again and said hysterically, "Go call a doctor, get away from me." Chapter 11. That night, the doctor arrived very quickly. After Willow regained her senses, she washed her mouth several times in disgust. The anger in her heart kept surging uncontrollably. Willow felt that she was no longer clean. With such a tainted body, how could she still follow George in death? What if George despised her in the underworld? She had rejected one arranged marriage after another. Why did people keep harboring ill intentions toward her? After that day, Willow dismissed Georgios. No matter how much Jack threw tantrums, she never relented. Later, when Jack cried himself to exhaustion, he was carried off to sleep by the servants. She sat alone in the study, taking out the photo she had kept hidden close to her, gently tracing it with her fingers. A sharp pain once again spread through her eyes. Not long after, Freya came in carrying a plate of pastries. She said, "Sis, I just made these. Try them." Willow placed the photo face down on the table, steadied her emotions, and took the plate. While she was eating, Freya helped tidy up the scattered papers on the desk. During the process, she accidentally knocked a small piece of paper onto the floor. Willow, being blind, didn't notice. Freya didn't pay much attention either and picked up the empty plate about to leave. But the paper had landed right at her feet. Out of the corner of her eye, Freya thought she saw a familiar face. She lowered her head. Only then did she realize it was a photograph. Freya let out a surprised huh and bent down to pick it up. Only then did Willow notice the missing photo beside her, her voice suddenly rising. "Give it back." Before she could finish, Freya asked in confusion, "Sis, why do you have a photo of my boyfriend?" Willow's voice stopped abruptly. Freya looked at the man in the photo smiling brightly and continued asking, "When was this taken? I've never seen it before." After a long moment, Willow heard herself ask calmly, "Which boyfriend are you talking about?" Freya replied as if it were obvious, "Georgios, of course. Sigh, my true love is back now. I was planning to break up with him. But he really loves me. He was practically about to kneel and beg me not to leave. I don't even know what to do anymore." "Sis, why aren't you saying anything? Where did you get this photo?" Chapter 12. After being dismissed, I didn't look for a new job. My mission was just one step away from completion. So I deliberately acted like I had stopped working entirely, putting on a painful show of desperately trying to win Freya back. From time to time, I would even go provoke the male lead. However, one evening, just as I was about to head out to find Freya and bow again, Jack, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, suddenly appeared at my door. A housekeeper stood beside him. The moment Jack saw me, his eyes turned red and he threw himself into my arms, mumbling unclearly, "Why, uncle, I missed you," the housekeeper said from the side. "Sir, I'm the new housekeeper. The young master insisted on coming to see you. I hope we're not disturbing you." I picked Jack up and pinched his cheek. "It's fine, not a disturbance." After the housekeeper left, I smiled and said, "Kid, you haven't had dinner yet, right? I'll make something for you." He followed closely behind me. "I'll stay with Uncle Giorgio's." After dinner, I watched cartoons with him. When Jack got tired, he leaned against me and gradually dozed off. I picked up a blanket and wrapped it around him. "Half asleep," he murmured. "Daddy, Daddy." I chuckled softly inside. At that moment, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Willow was standing outside. Thinking about what happened that night, I didn't dare say much and only asked politely, "Are you here to take Jack home?" But this time, she stood there for a long time without speaking. Her gray, unfocused eyes were fixed on me, unmoving. "Ms. Lou." After a long while, Willow finally responded, her voice slightly hoarse. I stepped aside to let her in. She remained where she was and said, "I can't see. Can you guide me?" A strange feeling rose in my heart, but I still stepped forward to support her. However, she slowly placed her hand into mine, intertwining her fingers with mine, and said calmly, "This is more convenient." Her hand gripped mine tightly, and her temperature seemed to rise. I shifted uncomfortably, but she held on even tighter. After helping her sit down on the sofa, I asked casually, "Do you want some water?" Unexpectedly, she nodded. "Yes." The strange feeling in my heart deepened. Her movements while drinking water were elegant but slow. I waited for quite a while, yet she still hadn't finished. Just then, a loud clap of thunder sounded outside. Soon, heavy rain began to pour. I checked the weather forecast and realized there would be a storm tonight. Hearing the rain, Willow finally finished her water and asked softly, "Is it raining?" I looked at the mother and son in front of me. One blind, the other only 2 years old. I couldn't bring myself to let them go back in such weather. After hesitating, I said, "Why don't you stay in the guest room tonight?" Willow seemed to curl her lips slightly, though it vanished so quickly I thought I imagined it. She nodded gently. "Then I'll trouble you." Chapter 13. That night, Willow and Jack slept in the guest room. I lay on the bed in the master bedroom, calculating there was only one final plot point left. Once I completed it, the mission would be done. As I thought about it, I gradually fell asleep. But in my dreams, I felt something like vines wrapping around me. A warm breath brushed against my neck, making me shift uncomfortably. But the vines quickly wrapped around me again. They brushed against my face, slowly and carefully tracing along my features. From my eyebrows to my nose, then to my ears, finally settling on my lips. Annoyed, I waved my hand. The next second, something soft pressed against me. The familiar sensation instantly pulled me back into the past. As our breaths intertwined, I almost instinctively parted her lips, deepening the kiss. Willow's blood seemed to boil. The dryness in her eyes brought another wave of pain, but this time it was mixed with a trembling sense of pleasure. George was still alive. This realization nearly made her weep tears of blood. Chapter 14. When I woke up in the morning, I touched my lips. They hurt a little. Did a mosquito bite me? After getting up, I realized Willow and Jack had already left. Breakfast had been prepared on the table. I didn't think much of it. After eating, I headed out. As long as I completed today's final task, I would officially exit the stage. During this time, I hadn't held back from secretly provoking the male lead. Today, I even had to deliberately injure myself, fall down the stairs and frame him for it. And this time, the male lead would play all the recordings of the harsh things I had said before, making Freya completely disappointed in me. In the end, she would dump me and firmly choose him. I followed the script step by step all the way until I fell down the stairs, hitting my head and drawing blood. Everything went smoothly. However, when the male lead played the recordings of my threats, Freya didn't immediately break up with me as the system had predicted. She looked at me, my face full of affection, and hesitated before asking, "Did Martin really hit you?" I nodded painfully. The male lead, Martin, exuded a strong presence. After firing off a series of sharp remarks at me, he said, We can check the surveillance footage. But the next second, someone beside him whispered, "The person behind this club is very powerful. They might not cooperate with us." Martin was speechless. At that moment, footsteps sounded from behind. We all turned at the same time and saw the club's manager and staff surrounding Willow as if she were the center of attention. She instructed the person beside her, "Go bring up the surveillance footage." Freya looked at her and the manager in shock. "Sis, you're in charge of this place too?" The system exclaimed. Wait, the villainess is appearing now. But I didn't have time to care about that. I just wanted to finish the final plot point as soon as possible. Very quickly, the footage was retrieved. Everyone clearly saw it was me who had deliberately fallen down the stairs. From beginning to end, Martin hadn't touched me at all. Freya was completely disappointed in me. She frowned and said, "Georgios, I didn't expect you to be this despicable. Let's break up. We shouldn't see each other again." Soon, like a victor, Martin left with Freya. The onlookers who had been watching the drama pointed at me and made a few remarks before leaving as well. Finally, the system congratulated me in my mind. "Congratulations, host, the mission is fully complete." Even though my arm hurt like hell, hearing the system's announcement made me overjoyed. However, when I turned around, I saw that Willow was still standing not far away. She was walking toward me. She leaned closer, sniffed the scent of blood on me, and let out a soft scoff. "George, why do you look so miserable?" Chapter 15. My heart skipped violently and I looked up in panic. I saw her standing there with a gloomy expression, asking slowly, "Do you really like my sister that much?" For some reason, I suddenly recalled the two things Freya had warned me about at the very beginning. My brother-in-law passed away not long ago. My sister cried herself blind because of it. That widow is pretty unhinged now. Don't provoke her. My scalp went numb. I hurriedly called out to the system. "System, help, hurry and deal with your so-called villainess." The system sighed. "Host, you're on your own now. Good luck." In my panic, I tried to play dumb. "Ha, Ms. Lou, what are you talking about?" The system added quietly, "Oh right. Just now when I saw your mission was completed, I removed the sound filtering effect placed on Willow." "Me?" It continued. "Which means she can now hear your real voice." My heart completely sank. Chapter 16. After that, we first went to the hospital to get my broken arm set in a cast. Then we returned to Willow's private apartment. In the dim room, I said with a lifeless expression, "I've got a freaking broken bone. Are you blind?" The moment I said it, I remembered she really was blind. Willow shook her finger lightly. "As long as your waist isn't broken, continue." I was speechless. The next day, Jack changed how he addressed me. He started calling me Dad. A few days later, the 100 million reward arrived. The system asked if I wanted to return to the real world. Seeing me hesitate, it simply waved its hand. "All right, I'll just give you a portal. You can freely travel between both worlds anytime. And now I can grant you one more wish." Hearing that I could freely move between the real world and the novel's world, I was finally satisfied. Thinking about Willow's eyes, I asked, "Can you heal Willow's eyesight?" The system immediately replied, "Of course. Drink this restoration potion and it'll take effect soon. Wishing you happiness every day, host. Goodbye." Chapter 17. Willow's eyesight recovered gradually. At first, she could only see vague silhouettes. Taking advantage of her poor vision, George didn't hold back from coaxing her into wearing all kinds of little dresses she used to refuse. Until one day, she opened her eyes. George was holding her, sleeping soundly with his eyes closed. Willow blinked, as if she could never get enough, quietly watching him for a long, long time. When George woke up, he stretched lazily. Before even opening his eyes, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. "Morning," he said. Willow stared at him blankly. George asked, "Hey, why are you staring like you've seen a ghost?" Only then did he finally notice the brightness in Willow's eyes. Willow lifted her gaze and saw the man's excited expression. George shouted happily, "Willow, you can see again." Chapter 18, Freya Extra. In fact, Freya already knew that Georgios had been secretly provoking Martin. Troubled, she went to Willow to complain. "Sigh, what should I do, sis? Georgios is a bit too much, but he just loves me too much." Willow tightened her fingers, her expression calm as she said, "A man like that, good at disguising himself, isn't capable of truly loving you." Freya looked half confused. "What do you mean?" Willow said evenly, "If he can sweet-talk and deceive you today, he can do the same to another woman tomorrow. And he might even abandon his wife and child. Freya was shocked. Sis, you're right. So that day, when Freya found out that Georgios had framed Martin and was planning to deceive her again, she said decisively, "Let's break up, Georgios." Sometime later, Freya looked at Georgios and Willow walking hand in hand. She fell into silence. A wave of delayed regret and anger swept over her. Her face flushed red as she asked, "Sis, didn't you say he's best at lying?" Willow let out a soft laugh. "If he only lies to me, then I'm willing. Besides, I'm not like you. What we have now is true love. All right, don't forget to come to my wedding with my husband next week."